Her son-in-law forged her signature, then smiled across her dinner table. Helen Chambers, retired court clerk and widow, didn't blink. Nicole, her only daughter, looked away and passed the salad. By sunrise, Helen's house was locked, her trust refiled, and every proxy revoked. They thought she'd grow quiet with age. She grew documented. And when they tried to speak for her again, the court spoke louder. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The pen sat between them like a weapon. Uncapped, ready. Helen Chambers, 67, sat with her hands folded neatly on the table, eyes on the cream-colored paper in front of her. Across from her, Marcus leaned back in the dining room chair like he owned the room, or was moments from it. His suit was sharp but too tight in the shoulders, the tie slightly loosened as if he'd dressed with more confidence than time. His smirk, however, had been perfectly ironed into place. Nicole sat to his right, shoulders drawn in, fingers tapping a rhythm against her phone screen without ever unlocking it. Her dark hair was up in a hurried bun, and she kept glancing out the window like the trees had answers. Marcus tapped the paper with 2 fingers. It's simple. Durable POA, just like we discussed. We just need your signature here, he said, gesturing with his pen. And we can handle the equity stuff, streamline the process, get the refi rolling. Helen looked up. Her lips parted slightly, like she was tasting the air for venom. I don't remember discussing this, she said, her voice smooth but edged in something neither Marcus nor Nicole had heard from her in years. Marcus chuckled. We've been over this, Helen. You mentioned it, months ago, when we were talking about next steps, end-of-life stuff. Nicole cleared her throat softly. Mom, you did bring it up. In January, I think, after the shingles thing? Helen turned to her daughter. I said I was updating my will. That's different. Marcus leaned forward now, the pen aimed at her like an invitation dressed as authority. We just want to help. You've done so much. Now it's time to take it easy. Let us handle the logistics. The numbers. Helen lowered her gaze to the document, printed in bold near the top, power of attorney, financial and medical authority. Marcus had pre-filled his name on every line, from primary agent to secondary emergency contact. She didn't reach for the pen. You had your time, Marcus said suddenly, voice harder now. This house is too much. The upkeep, the taxes, it's not sustainable. You'll thank us in 6 months. Helen tilted her head, gaze sharp. Will I? Marcus mistook the tone for fatigue. This is just a formality. Helen ran a fingertip down the margin of the paper, a gesture of feigned consideration. And what happens after I sign? Nicole flinched. It's not like that. Marcus smirked. You sign, we refinance, clean up some accounts, maybe list the place in a year. Get you somewhere simpler. Helen's hand hovered over the page, then paused, then gently pushed the pen back toward him. I'm still reading. In truth, she wasn't. Her mind had left the room the moment he said, You had your time. She was back in a different chair, across from a different desk, earlier that day. The smell of legal pads and lemon-scented polish thick in the air. Her lawyer, Shauna, had printed 2 identical copies of her newly drafted living trust and reviewed them line by line. No one, not Marcus, not Nicole, had been named in it, not even once. You understand this moves everything out of probate, Shauna had said, and strips power from any agent not named here? Helen had nodded once. That's what I'm paying for. Now, back in her own dining room, she offered the barest of smiles. Marcus shifted. So, we good? She slid the document back toward him. Give me the night. Nicole finally looked up, brows furrowed. You just need to sign. Helen rose slowly, the chair legs scraping lightly against the hardwood. Exactly, which means I decide when and what. Marcus leaned back again, visibly annoyed. Fine, but don't wait too long. Timing matters. Helen stopped at the archway, her hand on the frame, in narration, as she looked over her shoulder at them both. He thought I'd sign, and I did. Just not what he expected. She walked out of the room, the sound of her steps sharper than her silence. In her bag, already zipped, the notarized trust, sealed and filed. The house was already gone, at least from their reach. They just didn't know it yet. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but Helen took another sip anyway. She needed something to hold, if not for comfort, then for cover. Marcus was still talking. Loudly, expansively, as if he'd already been handed the keys to a kingdom built from someone else's labor. And once we flip the upstairs into a dual-purpose loft, we can pull at least 25% equity, maybe more, he said, swirling his mug like it held stock prices instead of coffee grounds. I've got a guy who specializes in these age-out conversions. Retired properties are hot right now. Trust me. Nicole sat curled at the far end of the couch, a throw blanket over her lap despite the June heat. Her eyes flicked up for a second at Helen, then returned to the unlit fireplace. She hadn't said a word since breakfast. Helen didn't prompt her. She already knew what silence sounded like in this house. Marcus tapped his phone screen twice, checked something, then went on. Once the permits are in, I can fast-track a refinance. Clean split, short-term flip. Maybe a developer takes it off our hands with a sweet clause that gives you a spot in their senior living division. New place? Full concierge? Heated pool? Helen placed her mug down with a soft clink. Nicole shifted. Marcus, maybe we should... He held up a hand. Babe, let me finish. Helen watched the exchange with practiced stillness, the kind learned by women who have spent too long reading tone instead of words. She'd seen that gesture before. The way he cut Nicole off, not cruelly, just efficiently, like someone interrupting a weak signal on the radio. Nicole had spent years justifying that tone. He's not really cold, Mom, he's just focused. He works so hard he doesn't always say things the right way. You're just used to Dad's softness. Marcus is different. Different wasn't the word Helen would have chosen. She stood, smoothing the crease in her slacks. Excuse me. I need to check something upstairs. Marcus waved her off without looking up. Helen moved down the hall and into the study, where yesterday's papers still sat half-organized on her desk. She pulled open the drawer and found the POA Marcus had left behind. Sloppy. Unwitnessed. He hadn't even taken it with him, too sure he'd return for it with her signature neatly added. She laid it flat, then used her phone to take 3 high-resolution photos, each from a slightly different angle. She didn't rush. Lighting, focus, precision. Then she opened her encrypted estate app and uploaded the files with a single line typed underneath. Build the firewall. She hit send. A ping confirmed delivery. Upstairs, the attic stairs groaned as she pulled them down. Dust filtered through the shaft of light that spilled into the hallway. She hadn't been up there since Charles died. 6 years. Maybe 7. The air was warmer, dry, faintly metallic with the scent of aged insulation. The old banker's box was exactly where she remembered, far back, beside the suitcase they never used, and the box labeled Nicole College. She didn't look inside that one. Inside the banker's box, the deed. The title still bore her name, sole owner, no lien, no cosigner. Charles had made sure of it after his last round of radiation. Keep it clean, he'd said. Don't let them trap you in shared ownership if anything happens to me. She smiled faintly, then frowned harder. She carried the deed downstairs, brushed off the dust with a dish towel, and fed it into her scanner. Page by page, corner aligned. No blur. As the machine hummed, Helen watched the bar crawl across the screen. 1 green square at a time, the document saved with a soft chime. She named the file, Property Title, Chambers Only Outside. Marcus's voice carried through the open kitchen window. He was laughing now, calling someone brother on speakerphone, talking about market value like he'd already been granted legal entry into a space he'd only ever occupied by marriage. Helen clicked off the scanner. Then she whispered to herself, calm and certain, not anymore. Helen heard the word cash out before she even turned the corner. She paused just outside the study where Marcus's voice bounced off the walls with casual entitlement. He was pacing now, phone tucked between his shoulder and ear, hands gesturing like the other person could see them. Yeah, she's still in it, but it's basically an end-of-life sale. Easy cash out, he said, half laughing. It's not about kicking her out, it's just about being smart with unused space. No liens, clean title. We'll flip it in a year tops, then use the surplus to leverage something in Asheville. Something newer. Helen didn't move. Marcus's voice lowered slightly, like he sensed her presence, but didn't respect it enough to stop. The house is too big, and it's not like she's going to use the den. Nicole wants a nursery eventually, and I'm not wasting square footage on outdated wood paneling. Helen stepped back before he turned around, disappearing down the hallway with the soundless grace of someone who'd worked 3 decades in courtrooms full of men who assumed she wasn't listening. By the time she reached her bedroom, she no longer felt the floor beneath her, just the quiet simmer of something harder than anger, not rage, not grief, resolve. She pulled open the drawer of her bedside table and retrieved a slim leather folder. Inside were her original account statements, checking, savings, 2 IRAs, one in her name only, the other rolled over from Charles. She opened her laptop and began logging in, one account at a time. Each password had been changed in the past month, each security question rewritten with answers Marcus couldn't guess, not even if he rifled through every drawer in the house. She pulled up the interface for her personal banking dashboard and began the export. Full PDF statements, quarterly reports, auto-generated summaries. One by one, she saved them into a folder titled Estate, Fortress. Once downloaded, she encrypted the entire folder and uploaded it to the secure vault Shauna had set up for her last fall. Back when Helen first suspected Marcus had more interest in her garage than her well-being. She paused only once, to breathe, not hesitate. Then opened her email and sent a message. Subject, meeting, urgent, to Shauna R. McLean, Esquire Body. I need a structure that survives me, but not them. Can you make time tomorrow? She hit send. Then she leaned back and let her gaze drift toward the ceiling fan above. It turned slowly, rhythmically, a measured beat, like time reminding her it was still hers. The next morning, Helen walked into Shauna's office carrying a leather tote, her expression unreadable but alert. The assistant offered her coffee. She declined. She didn't want anything to soothe her nerves. This was clarity, not combat. Shauna motioned her in and closed the glass door. I read your message. I'm listening. Helen sat, pulled a small notepad from her bag, and flipped it open. Every line had a heading. Every heading was underlined. What's the cleanest way to ensure they can't touch the house? She asked without preamble. Not now, not when I'm gone, not ever. Shauna didn't blink. Irrevocable living trust. You'll move the house into it immediately. You'll remain trustee, full control, but the asset is legally separate from your estate, meaning no probate, no reassignment without your instruction, and more importantly, no default inheritance. Helen nodded slowly. And the beneficiary? Whoever you name. Doesn't have to be Nicole. Doesn't have to be family. Helen closed the notepad. Good. Shauna sat forward. There's something else I want to suggest. An anti-contest clause. Anyone who tries to interfere, legally or otherwise, automatically forfeits rights to everything else in your estate, even the scraps. Helen allowed herself a small smile. Make it standard. Shauna smiled back. I'll call the notary. As the door closed behind her, Helen looked down at the plain silver ring on her left hand, the one she hadn't removed since Charles passed. She turned it slowly, then whispered, They gave me a deadline. Now I'm giving them one. Shauna's call came at 7:42 a.m., before the sky had fully lit the sidewalk outside Helen's house. Move now, Shauna said, skipping any pleasantries. If you file today, his claim folds before it begins. The second it's in the trust, it's untouchable. The bank, the deed office, anyone he tries to charm or bully, it won't matter. They won't see his name on anything. Helen stood in her kitchen barefoot, still holding a piece of toast she no longer intended to eat. Prep the paperwork, she said. I'm coming in. By 9:05 a.m., the house had a new name. The Helen Chambers Living Legacy Trust. Executed, notarized, recorded. Shauna watched her sign the final page with a nod of approval. It's airtight. Any pushback now counts as attempted interference. Helen didn't smile, but something eased in her jaw. Let them push. She pulled a photograph from her wallet and slid it across the table. A young man in a wheelchair, grinning crookedly, holding a fishing rod and a Diet Dr. Pepper. "My nephew Calvin," she said. "My sister's boy. Navy, Gulf Coast. Took shrapnel in both legs. Lives off disability and a modest pension. Smart as hell. No backup." Shauna studied the picture, then glanced up. "You want him named?" Helen nodded. "He's the only one who ever asked if I was okay after Charles died. Calvin James Turner, age 29, was entered into the document as sole beneficiary, not a relative by law, but by blood and by loyalty. The filing office time-stamped the trust at 11:12 a.m. By 11:47, Marcus was already trying to break it. He called her bank from a number registered to Nicole's shared account. The rep flagged the call immediately. The voice didn't match voice ID. The security answers were wrong. Access denied. The call was logged, tagged, and escalated. Helen received the notification via text, calm and clinical. Unauthorized access attempt, 11:47 a.m. Failed. She saved the message to her encrypted archive with 2 clicks. 10 minutes later, her voicemail pinged. "Nicole. Hi, Mom. Can we talk? I think you're being dramatic. Nobody's trying to hurt you, we're just worried. Marcus is under stress. It wasn't about control. It's about taking care of things. You don't have to go nuclear." Helen listened in silence, then tapped delete. She opened her laptop and turned on the camera. Her voice, when it came, was level and even. "This is Helen Chambers, date June 3rd, time 2:21 p.m. for legal record." She paused, then met her own gaze on the screen. "They say I'm being dramatic, but I know a setup when I see one. I've sat through depositions where grown men called women hysterical just to dodge signatures they forged. I've watched victims apologize for reading fine print." Her voice didn't rise, but it gained weight. "So let them call me dramatic. They'll call me owner next." She ended the recording and filed it in the same digital archive, labeled Video Evidence Preventative Next. She moved through every corner of her digital presence, updated all recovery emails, changed the answer to every question Nicole could guess, removed emergency contact permissions from 3 medical accounts, closed her joint grocery app profile. Even that. The separation wasn't just legal now, it was cellular, coded into every line of access she once offered in good faith. Outside, the afternoon sun bent lazily through the blinds. Helen pulled them shut, then opened her estate dashboard one last time and typed, "All points secured." Nothing left open. Her hands stilled on the keyboard. A soft buzz from her phone lit up the screen. Another voicemail. Marcus, this time. Helen didn't listen. She forwarded it directly to Shauna with a subject line. "Record this one, too. The storm's warming up." The woman at the door wore neutral slacks, a muted blouse, and a badge clipped to a canvas tote that read Tri-State Appraisal Group. Helen opened the door wide, offered a faint smile. "You're right on time." The appraiser, mid-30s composed, stepped in, eyes scanning the crown molding, the floor trim, the vintage built-ins that Charles had restored by hand 15 years ago. "We should be in and out in under an hour. Is your son available?" Helen's brow lifted just slightly. "My son?" The appraiser looked down at her clipboard. "Marcus? Chambers?" Helen's smile didn't falter, but it grew colder. "Marcus is my son-in-law, and he doesn't live here." The appraiser hesitated. He was listed as the point of contact and authorized representative. Helen reached into the side drawer of the foyer table and pulled out a slim envelope. Sealed, stamped, addressed. "For you," she said, holding it out. "A formal cease and desist. From my attorney. Marcus has no legal standing to request, schedule, or authorize appraisals for this property." The woman opened it with slow fingers, eyes scanning the first few lines. Then she looked up again, the clipboard slowly lowering to her side. "I wasn't aware," she said softly. "I was told this was an end-of-life transfer in motion." Helen folded her hands neatly. "You were told wrong." The appraiser nodded once, almost gratefully. "I'll notify my office." "No rush," Helen replied, stepping aside. "You're welcome to enjoy the molding. Charles would have appreciated the effort." Later that evening, Marcus walked through the door like nothing had happened. Nicole trailed behind him, her lips pressed into a line that might once have been concern, now just muscle memory. Helen stood waiting in the living room. "You booked an appraisal under false authority," she said evenly. Marcus gave her a shrug that belonged on a basketball court. "Just getting the ball rolling. I assumed you were stalling." "You assumed wrong." Nicole stepped forward. "Can we not, please?" Marcus thought. "I don't care what Marcus thought," Helen interrupted, voice like polished steel. "The title moved last week. The trust is filed. The house is no longer part of my estate. It's legally protected." Irrevocable, Marcus scoffed, but she could see it, the pause in his breath, the quick mental math. "You can't do that," he said. "I already did." Nicole looked stunned. "Why would you, after everything we talked about, why would you cut us out?" "I didn't cut you out," Helen replied, eyes narrowing. "I stepped out of reach." Nicole's voice cracked just slightly. "You pushed him into this. You pushed him." "No," Helen said with such clarity the air itself felt still. "I just finally stopped being pushed." Marcus muttered something under his breath. Helen didn't ask what. Instead, she stepped around him, walked into her study, and pulled a stamped envelope from the drawer, already addressed to Shauna's office. Inside, a formal revocation of any previous financial delegation, a document ending even the possibility of shared decision-making. She placed it in the outgoing mail bin, then opened her phone and pulled up the locksmith directory. Booked for 9 a.m. sharp. Change locks. Replace keys. Set digital codes. Outside, the wind had picked up slightly, bending the shrubs against the porch rail. Helen stood at the front door and watched the night settle like a verdict. Inside, her phone buzzed again. Nicole. This time she didn't delete. The voicemail. She didn't need to. Tomorrow, the locks would change, and with them, the story. The locksmith arrived early. A quiet man in a navy jacket, tool bag slung across his shoulder, and a voice so soft Helen had to lean in to hear him. 4 doors, 2 deadbolts, and full keypad integration, he asked, glancing at his tablet. Helen nodded. "And the garage door code. New keypad outside, too." He paused, respectful. "You want a video feed attached?" Helen didn't hesitate. "Already ordered. Just install the mounts. I'll connect the cloud later." By noon, every entrance sang a different tune. Click, reset, code confirmed. The old brass keys, tarnished from years in drawers and careless pockets, were swept into a small plastic bag, handed to her like spent ammunition. She dropped them into the kitchen trash without ceremony. Then she opened her phone, typed slowly, deliberately. To Nicole. Message: "You have 1 week to collect your items. Please text first. I won't open the door without notice." The response came quickly, as expected. Nicole never did like unanswered power. Nicole. "Seriously? You're erasing your own family. I hope it's worth it." Helen read the words twice, not out of doubt, but to fully absorb the predictability of them. She replied, "Helen, no. I'm protecting what family used to mean. That's different." She didn't wait for an answer. Instead, she walked the new perimeter herself, tested each keypad, verified camera feeds on her phone app, front door, garage, side gate. She watched her own steps from 3 angles. Everything clear. Everything hers. At 5:32 p.m., the first test came. Marcus. He pulled into the driveway in the silver Audi with a cracked rear taillight, one Helen had paid for 3 Christmases ago. He stepped out like he still belonged, jacket slung over his arm, phone in hand, a bag from the wine store swinging casually from 2 fingers. He didn't knock. He tried the handle. Locked. Then rang the doorbell. The camera flickered to life. Helen, seated calmly in her reading chair, watched the feed appear on her phone screen. Marcus tilted his head, smiled wide. Too wide. The kind of smile meant to reset a narrative. Rewind tension. Pretend everything was negotiable. She didn't move. He knocked next. Just once. Then leaned forward to the doorbell cam. "Hey, just dropping off something for Nicole. Thought I'd catch you." Helen said nothing. Marcus waited a beat longer, smile cooling at the edges, eyes narrowing just slightly. He knocked again, this time Louder. Then, another smile. Smaller. Tighter. No big deal. Just wanted to check in. He left the wine bag on the porch like a peace offering, got in the car, and drove off. Helen waited 2 full minutes before opening the door. She didn't touch the bag. She slid it aside with her shoe and brought in the mail instead. That night, with the blinds drawn and the house utterly still, she pulled open the filing drawer and removed one last piece of paper, the original unsigned POA Marcus had tried to get her to formally finish. His handwriting was still on the signature line in light pencil. Just a placeholder, he'd said. Helen stared at it for a moment under the kitchen light, then walked out to the patio, lit the outdoor fire bowl Charles had installed the winter before his diagnosis, and fed the document to the flame one corner at a time. The paper curled and blackened, the edges lifting like surrendering hands. The ink blistered. The signature disappeared first. She watched until nothing remained but ash and wire binding. Behind her, the porch light clicked on automatically, triggered by motion. It cast her silhouette long across the flagstones. Helen didn't look back. She simply whispered, "Now you can't even pretend," and closed the door behind her. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. Not Marcus this time. Not Nicole. The woman standing on Helen's porch wore a tailored gray blazer and carried a sleek black briefcase. Her name tag read, Dr. Lillian Vega, Ph.D., court-appointed evaluator. She extended a hand. "Thank you for agreeing to this. It won't take more than 90 minutes. Helen shook it firmly. "I have 92. Coffee?" Dr. Vega smiled faintly. "Black, if you're offering." They sat in the sunroom. No distractions. Just natural light, a ceramic mug on either side of the table, and a thick folder between them. Dr. Vega explained the parameters. Memory recall, logic comprehension, reasoning assessment, language precision. A full-scale competency evaluation, ordered quietly after a flag was raised during a routine concern report to Adult Protective Services. Helen didn't ask who filed the report. She didn't need to. The test began. She identified patterns in color-coded grids, repeated abstract story points in reverse order, spelled the word hysterical backwards without pause. At one point, Dr. Vega handed her a sheet and asked, "Draw a clock." Set it to 2:45. Helen drew it with precise numbers, all evenly spaced, the hands sharp, centered. When it ended, Dr. Vega looked at her with a strange kind of respect. "You scored 29 out of 30, she said. "Most people your age score closer to 24. Helen took a sip of her now cold coffee. "I'm not most people." Dr. Vega packed up, left her a copy of the findings, and promised an official file would follow within 3 business days. It arrived that same afternoon, digitally certified, time-stamped, legally admissible. Helen downloaded the file and opened her estate dashboard. She attached the document to her living trust under the subfolder Cognitive Cert, External Eval, June 9th. Then opened a second tab and began a new document. Subject: Counter motion, fraudulent conservatorship attempt by non-relative filed against Marcus D. Langston. Filing basis: preemptive response to unauthorized POA submission and deceptive third-party appraisal scheduling. Shauna reviewed it within the hour and replied with 3 words: filed, locked, filed again. Helen sat back in her chair. The window behind her framed the top of the magnolia tree Charles had planted the week Nicole graduated high school. She stared at it for a long time before moving again. Then she opened an incognito browser window. Searched Langston and Jarek Realty, Employee Contact Directory. She found Marcus's direct office line, then clicked over to his regional manager's email, attached the mental competency report, no message, no explanation. She simply renamed the attachment, Helen Chambers Mental Certification. FYI, she hit send, then leaned back and murmured to herself, "If he thought I was weak, let the state disagree." At 6:12 p.m., her phone buzzed. Nicole. The screen lit up with her name, her contact photo still a year old. A beach shot, sunlight, sunglasses, salt in her smile. Helen let it ring out. At 6:16 p.m., it buzzed again. A text. "Nicole, I'm outside. Can we just talk?" Helen didn't answer. Instead, she stood at the front window, watching Nicole's car idle at the curb. Her daughter stepped out, walked up the path slowly, hesitating at the first porch step. Helen remained still behind the curtain, heart beating, but hands steady. Nicole reached for the doorbell. Nothing happened. The system was on silent mode. Helen didn't move, didn't flinch. After nearly a full minute, Nicole turned and walked back to the car. Helen sat down again, opened her encrypted archive, and recorded a new voice note. "This is Helen Chambers, dated June 9th, 6:30 p.m. Attempted drop-in by former daughter. No prior notice. Notified no contact preference remains in place. Action logged, but no engagement occurred." She saved the file, filed it under a new folder. Uninvited visits. Emotional documentation. That night, she poured herself a small glass of scotch, Charles's favorite, and let the ice melt slowly. No fire, no music, just proof of life, of strength, and silence no one else could rewrite. The storm didn't break. It spread. By noon the next day, Shauna had already contacted the National Title Fraud Task Force. The email subject line was clinical but unmistakable. Multi-state property risk, elder abuse risk level. High attached were over a dozen documents, POA scans, notarized trust papers, the failed appraisal correspondence, and the mental competency certification with redacted medical headers but bold legal validity. Within 2 hours, Helen's name was entered into the National Property Alert Registry, flagged as high sensitivity across 6 bordering states. Any attempt to move, refinance, list, or lien her assets without dual-point verification would trigger an immediate legal hold, a net, built by women who understood how predators moved. That afternoon, Helen logged into her federal identity account and began checking boxes. IRS fraud notification, credit bureau freeze, all 3. Beneficiary access restrictions, property freeze, state and federal overlay. Lockdown, financial proxies. Each form required a signature. She signed them all with clean strokes and a steel-trimmed steadiness. Then she opened a blank document and typed 2 words at the top. "When they said I was done." The font was small, simple, but the sentence held a current. She stared at it for a long while, then began outlining. Not chapters. Entries. What they called logistics. How shame wears a polite smile. Your house is not their exit plan. By the time dusk brushed against the edges of the curtains, she had written 6 pages, half outline, half fire. At 5:11 p.m., Helen opened her phone and pulled up Nicole's contact. Her photo still smiled back. Vacation tan, windswept hair, eyes from a different decade. Helen hovered for one breath, then tapped, block contact. A quiet finality followed, a digital silence, no more rings, no more pretending. She walked to the hallway closet, pulled down the dusty photo box from the top shelf. One by one, she sorted through prints, birthdays, graduations, quiet smiles. When she reached the photo she'd been avoiding, she froze. Nicole. Marcus. A younger Helen in the middle, arms around both of them, the cake in front of them reading New Beginnings. Helen ran a finger down the glossy edge. The print had warped slightly from time. She took a breath, then fed it, without hesitation, through the shredder. The machine whirred softly. The moment disappeared. She returned to her desk and opened her will. Scroll. Locate clause. Edit. Clause 12. Contestation protocol. Any heir or affiliate who challenges this document, formally or informally, shall be immediately and irrevocably removed from eligibility. She typed a short note beneath the clause for Shauna. Request notarization of amended clause. Title, The No-Take Rule. She hit save. Then she stood, crossed to the front window, and looked out at her garden. Peonies in bloom. Charles had loved those, always said they bloomed angry and faded proud. With a sudden precision, Helen turned away from the window and headed outside. She rolled out the can of paint she'd bought last week. Ocean Slate, the can read. The trim had been chipped too long. The shutters faded. The front porch rails whispered for attention. Helen painted. 2 hours, 4 coats. When she finished, her shoulders ached, but her jaw unclenched. She stepped back, snapped a photo from the sidewalk, captioned it, "Still standing," then posted it publicly to her once quiet Facebook page, where half a dozen old coworkers followed her quietly, still remembering the courtroom clerk who once won a harassment complaint using only transcripts and timestamps. The first comment came within minutes. "You look strong, Helen." Helen didn't reply. She didn't need to, because strong wasn't what she felt. She felt exact. And that night, as she filed her last document for the day, a scanned image of the freshly painted house titled Proof of Continuance.jpg, a new email popped into her inbox. Subject, Inheritance Inquiry, from Nicole Langston. Body, "Are you really going through with this?" Helen stared at it, then clicked Archive, and typed one note to herself. "They wanted me quiet. Now I'm published in every system they can't override." The cafe was loud enough to offer cover. Background clatter of mugs, espresso steam, and small talk. Helen chose a seat in the far corner, back to the wall, facing the door. She didn't like surprises anymore. Nicole arrived 5 minutes late, her posture folded in on itself. She wore no makeup, just a hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. Her eyes flicked around nervously before she spotted Helen. "Hi," Nicole said, breath shallow. Helen nodded once. "Sit." A beat passed, then Nicole did. Neither ordered anything. "I didn't know he was going that far," Nicole said quickly, as if rehearsed. "I mean, the POA? The appraisal? I didn't know until after." Helen said nothing, just watched her daughter fidget with the paper napkin in her lap until it split. "He lied to me too," Nicole continued, her voice cracking. "He said it was just a financial planning thing, something to prepare for, like a safety net. I didn't know he was angling." Helen folded her hands, calm. "You knew he dismissed me." For years, Nicole blinked. "That's not fair." "You watched it," Helen said evenly. "You called it personality. You called it ambition." "I didn't think—" Nicole's voice caught. "You've always been so strong. I didn't think he could steamroll you." Helen tilted her head. "But you stood by when he tried." Nicole's eyes filled. "I'm sorry." A long pause. Then Helen pulled a slim folder from her bag and placed it on the table between them. Nicole stared. "What's this?" "Read the first page," Helen said. Nicole opened it. It was a copy of the trust. A clean, notarized version, dated, finalized, and witnessed. Nicole's name appeared exactly once. In the section titled Previous Assumptive Heirs. Redacted. Her eyes scanned the lines with a tightening throat. "So that's it? After everything? You just cut me out?" "I didn't cut you out," Helen said quietly. "I cut off what kept cutting me." Nicole shook her head. "You destroyed everything." "No," Helen said. "You stood by while I was erased. I stood up." The line hit the table harder than either woman expected. Nicole pressed the folder closed. "I don't know how to fix this." Helen reached into her bag once more, pulled out a check. Not a settlement, not a bribe, just enough to be final. "For therapy, or the move, or whatever it takes to make your next decisions without depending on someone else's." Nicole stared at the check, then looked away. Helen stood. This was the talk. There won't be another. And with that, she left. She didn't look back. She walked 3 blocks north to a small women's shelter tucked behind a Methodist church. The air inside smelled like old wood polish and borrowed hope. Helen approached the front desk and opened a velvet pouch, filled with the last of her wedding jewelry. Not the flashy pieces, just the ones that had meaning. The attendant looked surprised. "Are you sure?" Helen smiled softly. "I don't wear it anymore. Might as well help someone feel like they matter." She didn't leave a name. That night, Helen sat at her desk and opened the file from the district attorney's office. Fraud proceedings docket, preliminary hearing notice. Marcus's name was listed next to the words respondent and allegation, attempted elder financial exploitation. Helen clicked print. As the document fed through the machine, she tapped out a message to Shauna. "Confirmed. I'll attend in person. I want it on record." Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. Inside, Helen reached into her desk drawer and retrieved a small, leather-bound notebook labeled Testimony Notes. She turned to a blank page and wrote in steady script, "They spoke over me in my own home. Now the court can listen instead." She capped her pen, folded the notebook closed, and watched the printer finish spitting out her legal confirmation like it was a long-overdue receipt. The courtroom was colder than Helen expected, not in temperature, but tone. Polished wood, padded benches, a clock ticking over the state seal like it had the final say. The kind of room designed to make women feel small and paperwork feel important. Helen sat in the second row with Shauna beside her, not as her attorney this time, just as witness, anchor, watchtower. At 9:02 a.m., the bailiff called the case. People of the state via's Marcus D. Langston, preliminary hearing, allegation, attempted elder exploitation. Marcus entered with his lawyer in tow, blue suit, pale tie, hair combed too deliberately. His eyes met Helen's for one brief moment. She didn't flinch. When called to speak, Marcus didn't fight. He stood at the center, hands folded, face molded into a blend of contrition and strategy. "There was no criminal intent," he said. "Yes, I acted without proper consent, but my concern was always Mrs. Chambers's well-being. I feared she wasn't managing the estate responsibly. I may have moved too quickly. I admit I misrepresented my authority. But I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was trying to help. Maybe misguided, but not malicious." Helen didn't move, not until her name was called. She rose, smooth and deliberate, the leather notebook in hand. Judge Robbins nodded. "Ms. Chambers, you may proceed." Helen stepped into the center like it wasn't a courtroom at all, but a stage she'd been denied her whole life. Her voice, when it came, was low, precise, measured like testimony and sharpened like memory. "My name is Helen Chambers. I am 67 years old. I am of sound mind and clear memory, and I am not confused about what happened in my own home." She paused, eyes steady on the bench. "He didn't forget who I was. He hoped I would." A flicker of discomfort passed through Marcus's face. Shauna sat still, watching. Helen continued. "This wasn't a mistake. It was a campaign. Disguised in politeness, wrapped in paperwork, executed in my living room." The judge leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here to beg for restitution. I already handled my house. I handled my name. I'm here to ask for something else." Another pause. "I want this man assigned to community service, not just anywhere, but in an elder fraud education program. He should spend real hours explaining to vulnerable people how predators sound when they smile, what fake concern looks like when it wears a wedding ring." The courtroom was still. Even the court recorder paused half a second longer than usual. Judge Robbins tapped her pen once, then nodded. "Request granted." Helen inclined her head in return. Just once. Marcus's attorney whispered something fast into his ear. Marcus swallowed. "Additionally," the judge continued, "Mr. Langston, you will be fined in accordance with civil elder protection statutes and added to the National Fraud Registry. Permanent record. Non-expungible." Marcus barely reacted, but the way his shoulders dropped said enough. The gavel hit once. Session closed. Helen returned to her seat only long enough to collect her bag. She didn't wait to catch Nicole's eye, didn't linger for anyone else's. She exited into the bright morning like someone walking through smoke that hadn't touched her. Back home, the hallway light blinked on as she entered. The silence was familiar, not lonely, earned. She walked into the study and opened her file drawer one last time. Inside, one envelope with Marcus's name on it, unopened, probably junk, maybe a statement. It didn't matter. She tore it slowly, right down the middle, then dropped the halves into the shredder, watched the teeth chew him down into strips. Not hate, not revenge, just removal. That evening, as the sky tipped toward lavender, Helen made tea. Not scotch, not coffee. Chamomile. Warm, steady. The kind you sip when there's nothing left to defend. The front door camera lit up with motion. Just wind. She smiled, because no one was coming for her. House anymore, or her name, or her time. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, the microphone would be hers. The stage was smaller than it looked in videos. No dramatic curtain, no spotlight sweeping the floor, just a circular red carpet, a mic clipped discreetly to the collar of Helen's slate blue blouse, and a crowd of 300, mostly strangers, mostly younger, watching a woman who looked like someone's aunt, someone's neighbor, someone whose story wasn't supposed to end in fire. But that was the thing. It hadn't ended. The MC had introduced her as a former court clerk turned estate activist. There'd been polite applause, but the silence that followed was sharper. Listening silence. Helen stepped onto the carpet like it was a living room floor. No nerves, no apology. The screen behind her lit up with the title, Power of the Pen, Not the Punch. She didn't speak right away, just let the words hang there. Then she began. I was 67 years old when my son-in-law told me I'd had my time, that my house was too much for me, that he could handle the decisions now. No slides, no anecdotes played for laughs, just narrative. She walked them through the appraisal, the unsigned POA, the trust, the competency test, the silence at her own dinner table that stretched further than any lie. I was not confused, she said, her voice low and sharp. I was erased, and I knew the only way to reclaim space was to document louder than they maneuvered. Someone in the back sniffled. At minute 10, she told them about the court, the verdict, the shredder. At minute 12, she told them about her inbox. By the time I got home from court, I had 16 messages. Not from lawyers, not from Marcus, from women. Women like me, women who'd been told politely and repeatedly that they should sit down and let someone else manage the file drawer. The screen behind her shifted to a checklist. Bold, clean, legible from the back row. Your rights, your house. Request everything in writing. Revoke unused access points. Certify your capacity before they question it. Never sign at the table you didn't build. The crowd didn't erupt. They absorbed. At minute 14, she closed her notebook, smiled once. You don't need to fight dirty when you've built clean. The pen is slow, yes, but if you wield it right, it becomes law. She stepped off the stage to the kind of applause that didn't chase validation. It respected arrival. Within 48 hours, the talk was live. Within 72, it was viral. Helen didn't check the numbers. Shauna texted her the milestone, 1.2 million views, 1,287 emails. The messages came in bursts. From Kansas, Oregon, Maine, Texas. My son said my house would serve more people if I moved out. My niece had me sign something I didn't read. You helped me realize I still can fight. I thought forgetting was just aging. Now I know it was trained silence. Helen created a reply template. Not impersonal, just clear. Thank you. You're not alone. Protect your space. Say it twice if they pretend not to hear. She hired a local web designer, someone fresh out of school, and launched a nonprofit. Penproof, Literacy Before Legacy. Small, targeted, workshops for estate awareness, downloadable PDFs, monthly webinars. The logo was clean, a house key doubling as a pen. That week, she received one final email from Nicole. Subject, no excuses, body. I know I stood by. I thought silence was safety. I see now it was surrender. I can't undo what I allowed, but I hope one day you'll remember who I was before him. I do miss you. I do love you. Nicole Helen didn't reply. Not because it didn't matter, but because she no longer answered from pain. She opened her incoming archives folder and moved the message there. Not deleted, not ignored, stored. As the nonprofit's donation page pinged with its first recurring donor, Helen walked outside, fresh mulch under her feet. The shutters were still ocean slate. The doorbell camera caught the soft breeze ruffling her hair. Inside, her laptop chimed with a calendar reminder. Upcoming webinar, How to Say No Legally. She smiled and clicked Join. The screen opened, and 174 women waited. Helen made the final change to her will on a rainy Thursday morning. No ceremony, no hesitation, just a single-line insertion beneath Clause 5, disposition of real property. Primary residence to be donated in full to Penproof Foundation for Education, workshops, and housing support. No one else was listed, no contingencies, no sentimental exceptions. She hit save. The cursor blinked once before the legal document sealed. Just like that, her house, her battlefield, her bunker, her last line in the sand became a resource instead of a target. She stood up slowly from her desk, stretched the stiffness from her shoulders, and walked outside. The light drizzle misted her arms, the shutters still the same ocean slate she had painted herself. That night, she opened her personal blog, the one she'd used years ago for quilting updates and holiday letters. Now, she titled her final post, "Signed, Not Silenced." The body of the letter read, "This house held more than walls. It held decisions, denials, and eventually defiance. I leave it now, not because I lost, but because I learned the victory isn't in what you hold on to. It's in what you refuse to surrender quietly. I am not vanishing. I am choosing the exit for once. And if you're reading this, wondering if you should do the same, open the door. Step through. Lock it behind you, if you must. Just know you can walk, too. Helen." She clicked publish. The view count climbed in real time. Slow, steady, undeniable. 3 days later, on a Saturday brushed with warm light and garden breeze, Helen hosted a backyard retirement party. No banner, no paper hats, just folding tables, citrus iced tea, and chairs set in neat half-moons. Camille arrived first, in sneakers and a sundress, arms full of homemade lemon bars and a container labeled, "Don't Tell My Diet." Then Shauna, elegant as ever, her laughter dry and knowing. So this is what victory smells like, fresh mulch and lemon glaze. Finally, Calvin, tall now, stronger than the last time she'd seen him, walking better. His limp less pronounced, but his eyes still soft. He handed her a wrapped parcel, sheepish. Inside, a black frame, white background, a single printed phrase, centered in serif, "Power of the pen, not the punch." Beneath it, a still from her TEDx talk, Helen, mid-sentence, eyes forward, unapologetic. She swallowed against the ache in her throat. "You printed this?" Calvin grinned. "They were selling mugs. I figured this was classier." The small crowd laughed. Helen didn't. She just placed the frame near the garden table where everyone could see it. Proof, again, of what couldn't be erased. As the sun dropped lower and the laughter slowed, Helen stood and raised her glass. To peace that doesn't ask permission, and to exits that look like beginnings. They clinked, they hugged, they lingered. But eventually, one by one, they left. Helen didn't cry. She walked back inside alone, the screen door shutting behind her with a whisper. Room by room, she moved like someone taking final inventory, not of things, but of echoes. She touched the stair rail Charles built when Nicole was 5, ran a finger across the piano she hadn't played since, closed the cabinet door that always leaned. In the study, she paused longest. Her framed marriage certificate, her daughter's middle school science trophy, the legal pad where she first wrote the words, "Build the firewall." She folded it closed and placed it gently in a box marked archive. Finally, she reached the front hallway. A clean marble dish sat on the entry table. She removed the house keys from her pocket, every copy she had, and laid them there. Each one landed with a click that sounded more like punctuation than farewell. Then Helen turned, walked out the door without locking it. Behind her, the house stood quiet, but it wasn't a ghost story anymore. It was a donation. And she was already gone. The new family arrived on a Monday afternoon. The sun was clean and direct, no shadows, no storm in the air. Helen stood across the street beneath the elm tree Charles had planted when they moved in. She didn't wave, just watched. The woman, early 40s, shoulders tense with disbelief, stepped out of a modest sedan followed by a boy who looked about 10, gripping a canvas backpack like it held his last 5 years. Behind them, a teenager slung a duffel over one shoulder, phone tucked against her hip. The front door was already open. Calvin had left it that way. Helen saw it the moment the woman stepped over the threshold. Her posture changed. Not relaxation, reverence. The kind of breath you take when something impossible has happened and you don't trust it yet. The woman turned a slow circle in the foyer, her fingers lightly brushing the trim. Her lips moved. Counting, maybe. Praying, maybe. She didn't know Helen was there. That was the point. This was no photo op. Helen crossed the street anyway, slowly, deliberately. The boy looked up, cautious. "It's okay," his mother told him. "She's the one who gave us the keys." Helen offered a small smile. "Just wanted to make sure the locks still worked." The woman nodded, eyes already wet. "You must be Helen Chambers." "I was," Helen said. "Still am, technically." She reached into her bag and handed over a thick, neatly labeled folder. Legacy binder, first occupancy transfer. Inside, instructions for the solar panel system, HOA contacts, foundation history, floor plans, emergency contacts, and a page titled, "If you ever feel alone in this house, read this first." The woman didn't open it yet. She held it like it mattered, like it had a pulse. They didn't speak after that. But they hugged, not long, not performative, just enough. Helen stepped back, hands in her pockets. "Good luck with the shelves in the laundry room. They lean right, unless you wedge a book under the back leg." The woman half laughed. "I'll keep a book ready." Helen turned before she could say anything sentimental. She'd already said it all in ink. She didn't look back until she was halfway down the block. From there, the house looked unchanged. Still ocean slate. Still hers, in a way. Only now, hers in the rear view. That night, in her new apartment, smaller, cleaner, 3 stories up with a balcony overlooking a quiet park, Helen opened her inbox. One new alert. Name change recorded. County Registrar, Nicole Langston, Nicole Hartley. No message, no announcement, just a legal log. Helen stared at it for a long moment, unsure whether to feel relief or resentment. She settled on release. A closing bracket. Another email below it. Subject line in all caps. Exit confirmed. Marcus D. Langston, moved out of state, no forwarding. She didn't click it open, just hit archive. 2 days later, she received a letter from Penproof's legal team. Calvin Turner appointed as board chair, effective immediately. She read the words 3 times, then looked over at the framed photo on her windowsill, the one from her TEDx talk. The words beneath it felt heavier now, more real. She thought of Calvin's crooked smile, the way he'd helped her carry the old garden bench back in from the rain, twice, the way he always asked first. Helen rose, poured herself a glass of water, and stepped out onto the balcony. Below her, a child on a scooter zipped past. A dog barked 3 floors down. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply. No judgment, no intrusion, just space. She whispered to herself, "This house finally belongs to someone who needs it." She meant hers, and the one she left behind. Inside, her phone pinged with a donation alert. Someone from Colorado this time. Helen didn't check the amount. She didn't need to. The name on the deed was no longer hers. But the signature? Still unmistakable. Still sharp. Still standing. The video started with no intro music, just Helen seated in front of a bookshelf lined with binders and framed court documents, the faint hum of her apartment's AC unit in the background. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a navy cardigan and clear eyes. Title bar, "What to Do When They Underestimate You." Helen Chambers, Penproof founder. She looked into the camera, steady as ever. People like to call it overreaction. I call it preemptive authorship. She paused, then smiled, but not warmly. More like a locked gate that didn't need to swing open anymore. "I didn't fight them with fury, I outfiled them." Behind her, the words trust, title, testament stood in metallic letters across the shelf, like a creed. She held up her original trust packet, corners soft with use. "You start here," she said, "even if no one's threatened you yet, especially if no one has, because quiet harm doesn't announce itself. It slides in through unasked favors and helpful suggestions." For the next 12 minutes, she walked viewers step by step through the exact legal firewalls she built. Independent evaluations, living trust versus revocable, power of attorney boundaries, cease and desist protocol, document duplication and off-site backup, the no contest clause no one wants to test. If they try to speak for you, Helen said near the end. Make sure the paper already spoke louder. She ended with a single sentence, sharp and final. This isn't paranoia, this is precedent. She clicked the mouse, uploaded the video, and walked away from the desk like she'd just taught a class that would never be unlearned. 3 weeks later, she got a call from a law school in North Carolina. The legal clinic's director left a voicemail. Your video is now required viewing in our elder law practicum. One of our students called it the quiet revolution in 14 minutes flat. Thank you. Helen didn't call back. She just saved the voicemail and filed it under evidence of change. The next Tuesday, 2 women knocked on her door. Not reporters, not donors. Sisters, both in their 70s. One had silver curls like snowdrifts, the other a voice that carried like it used to command PTA meetings and still could. They'd watched her video, had printed copies of their current estate plans, and they were done waiting to be talked over. Helen made tea, laid out pens, walked them through each form, each clause, each fear. She didn't just teach them, she translated. By the end of the afternoon, both women had a draft of their new trusts. One named her granddaughter as sole successor. The other had removed a son who had threatened to repurpose her condo for Airbnb. Helen didn't celebrate. She nodded. File it fast, frame the certified copy, put it above the kitchen sink. The silver-haired sister smiled. You're good at this. Helen shrugged. I got practiced. That night, Helen opened a new document in her word processor. No formatting, no outline, just a blank page and a blinking cursor. Title, the signature, They Regret She. Let it sit there. Then typed the first line beneath it. They didn't take my name. They just tried to mute it. A breeze moved through the cracked balcony door. She kept writing. 10 paragraphs in, she paused. Then reached for a piece of stationery, the kind with her old house's silhouette in watermark. She wrote herself a letter. Dear Helen, you were never helpless, just unheard. And look who's talking now. You. She folded it gently, tucked it into her journal, then turned off the light, left the window cracked, and let the words breathe through the dark like armor that didn't clang anymore. Her phone chimed once, an alert from Penproof. New inquiry. Request for speaker, National Aging Conference. Helen looked at it, smiled, and whispered, They're finally listening. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came in the subject line of the email just below. Nicole Hartley, submission request, personal essay for Penproof blog. The lights on the summit stage were warmer than she expected. Not blinding, not theatrical, just soft amber spilling across the wide black floor, like evening sunlight in a living room built to hold truth. 300 seats, all filled, 1,000 more watching the live stream. But Helen didn't scan the crowd. She already knew what faces she was speaking to. They'd emailed her, sat on her porch, opened mail that wasn't a check, but a checklist. This talk wasn't about surprise anymore. It was confirmation. Behind her, the screen pulsed with the title in pale gold, the signature They Regret. The moderator had introduced her as a national voice in estate equity and elder law empowerment. The phrase had made Helen chuckle inside, not out of modesty, but because of how far it all felt from the woman who once flinched at her own voicemail tone. Now she stepped forward. No notes, no hesitation. I was asked to give this talk on legacy, Helen said, her voice clear but steady. But I'm not here to talk about inheritance. I'm here to talk about interruption, because that's what it looks like when someone tries to overwrite your name in ink they didn't earn. A few heads nodded. She didn't stop to savor. They didn't kick down my door. They didn't threaten me. They smiled and called it care. They made me question the difference between being tired and being erased. She walked slowly across the stage, never needing to raise her voice. They said I was stubborn, so I built a legal wall. They called me dramatic, so I filmed a competency test. They said it was just a misunderstanding, so I documented everything. One slide flashed behind her, a photo of her home, freshly painted, ocean slate, captioned, "Still standing." The audience didn't applaud yet. They listened. She talked about the eviction she never had to survive because she wrote herself out of the crosshairs before they fired. She described the silence at her old dining table, the forged POA, the file folder with nothing sentimental, but everything that counted. She closed with a line she'd scribbled at midnight weeks ago. You don't owe forgiveness to people who gamble your safety like a down payment, but you do owe yourself the right to stay in the home your name built. And then, only then, the room stood. Not explosive, just deliberate. A forest rising all at once. Helen didn't bow. She just gave a soft nod, then stepped off the stage with the same posture she'd once walked into courtrooms with, quietly formidable. That night, back in her apartment, Helen kicked off her shoes and hung her lanyard on the coat hook by the door. She didn't bother with music. The hum of the fridge and the muffled sounds of someone's TV down the hall were soundtrack enough. On the living room wall, opposite her framed TEDx quote, hung something quieter. A document behind glass. Eviction notice, rescinded filed, stamped, signed. Not because she ever left, but because the system couldn't follow through with what wasn't legal. She had kept it, not out of bitterness, out of proof. She poured herself a glass of red wine, something dry and unapologetic, and sat down on the couch. Her laptop waited on the coffee table, lid still warm. She pressed play on her own TEDx talk, not to admire, not to relive, to remind. There she was, on screen, seated, then speaking. No fury, no theatrics, just Helen. Her voice filled the room, same as it had filled the courtroom, the garden, the non-profit site, the inboxes of strangers now pulling up their own chairs to the fire. She sipped slowly, her eyes flicking to the framed papers, her name printed in clean black ink. Narration, soft and certain, filled the room again, this time from memory, not screen. My name's still on everything. Theirs isn't on anything. Outside, the moonlight touched her balcony rail like it knew her. Helen didn't look away. She raised her glass toward no one in particular and said the final line aloud, like punctuation. He told me to sign and get lost. I signed, and he's the one who vanished. The screen went dark. The signature remained.